The young cashier at Walmart calls me honey, as if I were an ancient wreck in need of sympathy. Not ma'am or Mrs. Willoughby, but honey. I hate that. How are you doing today, sweetheart? She asks, punching through my defatted chicken. Wonderful. My voice sounds like sandpaper, especially when they call me by my first name. Faye. 3 letters. Her smile fades, but quickly recovers. At 67, I became invisible. My words are an empty sound, my desires an inconvenient nuisance, my presence an annoying reminder of the inevitable. Nina would say, Mom, you're being rude to people again. Why can't you just be nice? Because nice means non-existent. That's why. On my way home, I stopped by the post office. 32 years I worked here, knew every crack in the concrete floor. It's different now, new counters, new faces. But Esther Pringle is still here, with a haircut that hasn't changed since the 80s. Faye, she exclaims, haven't seen you in a while. How have you been? Just going through another day, I answer honestly. My days are a mere existence. Shopping, TV, sleeping, the occasional phone call from the kids that's more like a test to see if I'm still alive. What about Grant? Esther asks, fiddling with postage stamps. I hear he's going through some big changes. I freeze. What kind of change? Esther suddenly looks embarrassed. Oh, I thought you knew. His wedding. Marjorie Welch is doing the decorations for the ceremony, she told me. The rest of her words are drowned out in a strange humming noise that fills my ears. The wedding. My son is getting married, and I'm hearing about it from Esther Pringle. Of course I know, I squeeze out. I'm just thinking about other things. Wedding stuff, you know. I drive home on autopilot, my old Toyota knowing the road better than I do. Enid is a small town, and my 3-bedroom, 1-story house is only 12 minutes from downtown. The house Jack and I bought 35 years ago when he was still working in the oil fields. Back then, we had 3 kids, Nina, Caleb, and Grant, and big plans. Now Caleb has been gone 28 years, Jack 7, and plans die too. I leave the groceries on the table and immediately dial Grant's number. It's ringing. 1, 2, 3. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice sounding wary. Grant always knows when I have a reason to be upset. What's wrong? Nothing. I just wanted to see how you were doing. It's been a while. I'm fine, I'm just busy. Work, you know. Nothing else interesting? I'm giving him a chance, one chance to tell the truth. Pause. I can almost see him wrinkle his forehead, just like his father did when he was in an awkward position. Actually, yes, he finally says. I was going to call you this weekend. Yeah, Laurel and I have decided to get married. Laurel? I ask, even though I know exactly who I'm talking about. I've only seen that woman twice. At Grant's birthday party and last Christmas, when she smiled politely without saying much of anything. Yes, Mom. Laurel Paxton. We've been dating for 4 years. You know her. 4 years. I've seen her twice. When's the wedding? 3 weeks from today. I can hear the relief in his voice. At the Cherokee Hotel. Nothing fancy, just close friends and family. Family. I'm family. But I hear about my son's wedding from Esther Pringle. That's, wonderful, I squeeze out. Is there anything I can do to help with the arrangements? No, it's already organized. Laurel planned the whole thing. She's very, organized. Uh-huh, I see. Well, if you need anything. Sure, Mom. Listen, I gotta go. I got a shipment coming in. I got paperwork to do. I'll send you an invitation one of these days, okay? He hangs up without even waiting for an answer. I'm standing in the middle of the kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear and the chicken slowly defrosting on the counter. My son is getting married in 3 weeks, and I'm the last person to know about it. I wake up the next day with a determination I haven't felt in a long time. I'm going to be a part of this wedding whether Grant wants me to be or not. I'm his mother, damn it. I changed his diapers. I sat with him in the hospital when he had pneumonia when he was 8. I paid for his auto mechanic college tuition. I deserve better than a belated invitation. The Cherokee Hotel is the most pretentious place in Enid, with faux colonial architecture and prices that make your teeth chatter. This is where all the weddings are held. The front desk clerk looks at me like I'm coming in the back door. What can I do for you? Her gaze slides down my old jeans. I'd like to inquire about the Willoughby Paxton wedding, I say, straightening my back. I'm the groom's mother. Something changes in her gaze, the disbelief changing to professional involvement. Of course, Mrs. Willoughby. The wedding is scheduled for June 22nd, and the banquet hall is booked from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until midnight. All details are being arranged by Ms. Paxton directly. I'd like to see the banquet room. I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment, as preparations are underway for tonight's event. But you can contact our wedding coordinator. She's working with Ms. Paxton on your family celebration. Family. That's ironic. I find the coordinator's office in a side wing of the hotel. The door is ajar, and inside, I see two women leaning over a sample album. One is an unfamiliar blonde in a business suit. The other is Laurel Paxton. I recognize her immediately, even though I've only seen her twice. A slender woman with brown hair gathered in a neat bundle and eyes the color of cold steel. She doesn't notice me, engrossed in discussing some color scheme. I think lavender would be too pretentious for napkins, she says. Let's go with cream. I tap on the door jamb and both women look up. Laurel's face stiffens when she sees me. Mrs. Willoughby, she says without a shadow of a smile. What a surprise. It was a surprise to me to hear about the wedding, too, I parry. The blonde senses the tension and quickly introduces herself. You must be Grant's mom. I'm Crystal Miller, the hotel's wedding coordinator. We are so happy that your family chose our venue for this special day. That's right, a special day. While keeping her eyes on Laurel. The one I found out about yesterday. Laurel straightens up. Crystal, could you give us a minute? As the coordinator walks out, Laurel looks at me without pretense. Grant wanted to tell you himself, at the right time. The right time, I repeat, 3 weeks before the wedding. How nice of him. Faye, she calls me by my first name, without the Mrs. We both know you don't approve of our relationship. How can I disapprove of something I know next to nothing about? I've seen you twice in 4 years. You've always found reasons not to come to family reunions. Because they always turned into interrogations. She crossed her arms over her chest. Grant came back upset every time after your conversations. I want to object, but some part of me knows there's some truth to that. I did ask a lot of questions about her family, which Grant never said anything about her past, which he knew surprisingly little about for someone about to get married, about her job at the insurance company, which seemed too vague to me. I'm his mother, I finally say. I have a right to know who will be part of our family. Your family, Laurel echoed, and something flickered in her eyes. Something like anger, but deeper. You know what Grant says? That you consider everyone your property. Children, grandchildren, even the memory of your husband. Everything has to be the way Faye Willoughby wants it to be. She's a pain in the ass. Is that what my son says about me? It's not just him. She's softening, but only slightly. Look, I don't want to fight. Grant loves you no matter what. He wants you to be at the wedding. I want to be there too. No matter what, I say again. How generous. Laurel sighs and looks at her watch. I have a meeting in 15 minutes. Maybe we should talk later, when we're both ready to have a constructive conversation. I'm released like a naughty child. I walk out of the office, feeling my cheeks burning with humiliation. In the hallway, I run into Crystal, who delicately pretended not to overhear. Mrs. Willoughby, perhaps you would like to express your wishes regarding the wedding. I know how important it is for the mother of the groom to be involved in the preparations. Apparently not for all mothers, I reply, but then soften. Thank you, but everything's already planned. As I understand it. Well, not everything. Crystal lowers her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. For instance, the cake hasn't been ordered yet, and I know Miss Paxton is still having doubts about the music for the first dance. It's a small clue, but I'm grabbing for it. Grant has always loved vanilla cake with strawberry filling, I say. Ever since he was a kid. I used to bake him one just like it every birthday. Crystal nods, making a mental note. I'll pass that information on to the pastry chef, she promises. Often brides are unaware of such small but important details. At home, I find an old box of photographs. Among the pictures of Grant over the years, I find the one I've been looking for, his 21st birthday. In the picture, we are all together. Me, Jack, Nina and her husband, Grant and his then girlfriend, Becky. We smile. Grant blows out the candles on the cake, vanilla with strawberry filling. I call Nina. She answers after the fifth ring, her voice sounding out of breath. Mom, is something wrong? It's always the same. If I'm calling, something's wrong. Did you know about Grant's wedding? Pause. Too long. Yeah, he told me a month ago. A month. So I really am the last one. And you didn't think I should know too? He wanted to tell you himself, Mom. You know how you react to his relationships. How do I react? Critically, Nina answers bluntly. You always think you know best. Remember Becky? You brought the girl to tears at his birthday party by constantly reminding her how she cut the cake wrong. She ruined the cake. Who cuts a round cake into squares? See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It was his birthday, not yours. But you did it your way. I don't say anything because there's nothing to say. They all see me like this, controlling, critical, insufferable old woman, invisible when it comes to their lives, but suddenly materializing when things don't go my way. I just want to be a part of his life, I say quietly. Then accept his choice, Nina replies softer. Laurel is a good woman. She makes Grant happy. Do you know her well? Better than you do. We see her and Grant every month. Sometimes they come to visit us for the weekend. I can feel something tightening inside. They have their own lives, their own family that I have no place in. The next morning in the mailbox, I find a cream-colored envelope with ornate writing, a wedding invitation. Inside is a gold-embossed card. Laurel Paxton and Grant Willoughby invite you to share in the joy of marriage. My name is handwritten in Grant's handwriting. I attach the invitation magnet to the refrigerator and stare at it while I drink my morning coffee. Something's bugging me, some feeling that I'm missing something important. I reread the text again, studying every word. And then I notice, in the corner of the invitation, in small print, the New Beginnings Agency is coordinating the wedding, not the Cherokee Hotel, not Crystal Miller, some other agency. I grab my phone and dial the hotel's number. When I'm connected to Crystal, I get straight to the point. This is Faye Willoughby, Grant's mother. Do you work with the New Beginnings Agency? No, I'm an employee of the hotel, but Ms. Paxton does have an outside coordinator from that agency. We collaborate on technical matters. Could you give me their contact information? I'd like to discuss some details. Sure, Crystal replies. Here's the coordinator's phone number and name, Brenda Moffett. I dial Brenda's number immediately. A woman's voice answers after the second dial tone. New Beginnings Agency, Brenda speaking. Hi, my name is Faye Willoughby. I'm Grant's mother. You're in charge of arranging his wedding to Laurel Paxton. Oh, Mrs. Willoughby, Brenda exclaims with an enthusiasm I wasn't expecting. I'm so glad you called. Laurel mentioned that you could contact me. This is confusing me. Laurel mentioned? Did she? Yeah, she said you might want to contribute to the wedding planning. She really wants everything to be perfect for your family. I feel my eyebrows creep up in surprise. This is nothing like the cold woman I talked to yesterday. Well, that's wonderful. I'd really like to participate. Of course you would. Say, are you free tomorrow morning? We could meet at my office and go over all the details. Laurel mentioned that you have some great ideas for the cake. I agreed to the meeting, feeling a strange mixture of suspicion and hope. Something has changed since my visit to the hotel. Either Laurel has decided to include me in the preparations, or this is some kind of game. Either way, I finally got what I wanted, a chance to be a part of my son's wedding. So, why does the unsettling feeling never leave me? Why is it that every time I think of Laurel Paxton, a quiet warning bell sounds in my head? The New Beginnings office turned out to be a small room on the outskirts of Enid. Brenda Moffat, a woman in her 50s with short graying hair, greeted me with an enthusiasm that seemed excessive. Mrs. Willoughby, it's so nice to finally meet you. Laurel has spoken of you with such warmth. I almost choked. Laurel and warmth? After our meeting yesterday, those words seemed incompatible. I hope it's nothing bad, I said, sitting down. She said you'd always been supportive of Grant, that you were a strong woman who'd overcome a lot. That puzzled me. How does Laurel know what I've overcome? Let's cut to the chase. I'd like to know how I can help with the wedding planning. We spent an hour discussing cake, seating arrangements, and menus. Brenda was surprisingly receptive to my suggestions. She even took some photos of family heirlooms I had brought, my mother's old lace handkerchief and Jack's cufflinks. Laurel wanted to include those items in the ceremony, Brenda explained, as a symbol of Grant's acceptance into your family. When we were done, Brenda offered me coffee. I accepted, even though I don't usually drink coffee after noon, it keeps me awake. But I wanted to know more about Laurel. How long have you known Laurel? I asked. About 2 years. She came to us when she first started thinking about getting married. She's a very thoughtful girl. What do you know about her background? About her family? Brenda's a little tense. Not much, to be honest. Laurel doesn't talk about her past very much. I know that she grew up in the foster care system, that she had difficult times. That matched up with the little I knew. Grant mentioned once that Laurel's parents died when she was a teenager, but never told me anything else. And here's the weird thing. I'd never met any of her friends or acquaintances. It's like she doesn't have a past. And professionally, Grant says she works for an insurance company. Yeah, Midwest Insurance. She's a claims manager. Very successful from what I understand. You know, what surprises me is Laurel's sudden interest in my involvement in the training. I saw her at the hotel yesterday, and she wasn't not very welcoming. Brenda looked embarrassed. Oh, well, people under stress sometimes say the wrong thing. Weddings are always a nervous time. Leaving the office, I headed downtown to the post office building. Something told me that Esther Pringle might know more than she had told me the last time we met. Esther was pleased to see me. Twice in 1 week, Faye. To what do we owe this honor? Do you have a moment? I wanted to talk to you about Grant's fiancée. The Blue Cup wasn't very crowded. We took a table in the far corner, and I ordered tea. So, what did you want to know about Grant's fiancée? Esther asked. Everything you know. You knew about the wedding before I did, so you must know something about Laurel. Esther twirled the teaspoon in her cup. Not that I know much, but there's something strange. Remember Doris Hatch? My stomach instantly clenched. Of course I remembered that name. I remembered it all too well. Hatch? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The last name sounded familiar. Her husband, Mervyn, worked at the bank, First National on Grand Avenue, and Doris was a housewife. They had a daughter. I clutched the cup so tight my knuckles turned white. This can't be happening. No, it can't be. What do these people have to do with Laurel? I asked, trying to sound disinterested. Esther leaned closer, lowering her voice. They had a tragedy in '78. Mervyn killed himself, leaving a note saying he couldn't live with the shame. Turns out he was involved in a mortgage scam. It was a big scandal. My eyes went dark for a moment. I took a sip of tea to hide the trembling in my hands. Are you talking about that banker's suicide? I said cautiously. Yes, I remember something about it. Terrible story. Laurel's last name was Paxton, right? And Doris's maiden name was Paxton before she was married. I remember because I sorted her mail for years. And you think Laurel has something to do with that family? It's possible. She'd have to be in her 40s if she's Doris's daughter or niece. And there's a resemblance. Same brown hair, same eye shape. I had to get out of here, immediately. The blood pounded in my temples, and I was afraid Esther would notice how much this conversation had affected me. What happened to the Hatch family after the accident? I asked, already knowing the answer, but hoping my curiosity wouldn't seem suspicious. Terrible things. The bank sued Mervyn's heirs. They lost the house, all their savings. Doris became depressed, unable to care for her daughter. The girl was taken into the foster care system. And then what? Doris killed herself too, about a year after her husband, an overdose of sleeping pills. Every word was like a stabbing. I knew about it. Of course I knew it. But to hear it now, from Esther, when it all suddenly came together, Laurel Grant, the past that I'd buried so carefully. What a nightmare, I mumbled, standing up. I'm sorry, Esther, I have to go. Yeah, I remembered that I had promised to call Nina. Esther looked surprised at my sudden departure, but didn't delay. Of course, Faye. I hope I helped with your questions about Laurel. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and hurried toward the exit. I sat in my car for a few minutes without starting the engine, trying to calm my breathing. This couldn't be a coincidence. Laurel Paxton is actually Laurel Hatch, the daughter of Mervyn and Doris, the girl whose life was ruined because of— No, I couldn't even mentally say it. It was too scary. Instead of driving home, I headed to the town library. I needed to know for sure. The archives of the local newspaper, the Enid News, were stored there on microfilm, and I spent several hours going through the issues for the year 1978. The Mervyn Hatch scandal had occupied the front pages for weeks. Fraudulent banker defrauded veterans. Hatch's suicide and admission of guilt? One article in particular caught my eye. It stated that Merwin had mentioned blackmail in his suicide note. According to some reports, the banker claimed he was coerced into participating in a fraudulent scheme under threat of exposure. Police are investigating the possibility of extortion. But there were no names on the note. Mervyn took the secret with him. In subsequent issues, the line of inquiry disappeared. Instead, the focus shifted to the victims of the fraud and the fate of the Hatch family. I found a picture of Doris Hatch with her 12-year-old daughter. The girl was thin, with long brown hair and a serious look. The caption read, "Doris Hatch and her daughter Laurel may lose their home because of the crimes of the father of the family." Laurel Hatch, not Paxton. An hour later, I found another important detail, a small note about Doris Hatch's death. It mentioned that her daughter Laurel, age 13, would be placed in the care of an aunt on her mother's side, Elizabeth Paxton. That's where the last name came from. She took her aunt's last name to get rid of the Hatch family stigma. I made copies of the articles and walked out of the library feeling the ground go from under my feet. Everything matched. Grant's fiancée was the daughter of a man no, I still couldn't say it, even mentally. When I got home, I went straight to the bedroom and pulled an old metal box out from under the bed. Jack called it my secret drawer. It was where I kept important documents, memorabilia, and things I never told anyone about. Under a stack of my children's birth certificates was a yellowed folder labeled Medical Bills, Caleb. I opened it and my hands trembled. Caleb's medical bills, copies of checks, receipts, and among them, records of strange receipts of money in 1978 and 79. Anonymous charitable contribution. Read the inscription on the bank statement. $10,000, a huge sum for those times. Money that allowed us to continue Caleb's treatment in an experimental program. Money that I'd always told Jack and the kids came from a charitable foundation. But there was no charity fund. I closed my eyes, remembering the day I first opened the letter addressed to Mervyn Hatch. As a postal employee, I should never have done that. But Caleb was dying, and the experimental treatment was costing more than we could afford. That letter contained evidence of Mervyn's machinations with veterans' mortgages, and I used that knowledge. A phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was Grant. "Mom, I heard you met Brenda from New Beginnings." "Yeah, she seems, nice. Laurel said you showed interest in training. That's, unexpected." "Why unexpected? I'm your mother. Of course I want to participate." Grant sighed. "It's just that you usually criticize everything that isn't done your way. Laurel worked very hard to organize everything. I'm not going to criticize anything. I just want to help. By the way, I was wondering, did Laurel ever tell you about her family? Her parents?" Pause. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. We don't know much about her." "Because you've never taken an interest. And now, 2 weeks before the wedding, you're suddenly digging into her past?" "I'm not digging. I'm just asking." "Her parents died when she was a child," Grant said reluctantly. "She grew up with an aunt. That's all you need to know." "Did she say how they died?" "God, Mom, what difference does it make? It was a long time ago, and it's a painful subject for her. Why can't you just accept that she's part of my life and leave her alone?" "Grant, I just want to make sure you know the man you're going to marry." "Oh, that's it. You don't think I'm capable of choosing my own wife? You think I'm so stupid that I'm not a good judge of character?" "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant. You always thought I was the weakest, dumbest of all the children. Poor little Grant, he can't make a good decision without Mommy's help." "That's not true. I've always believed in you. I've always supported you." "Controlled me," he corrected. "There's a difference. And you know what? I'm not going to let you control my choice of wife. I love Laurel. She's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. And if you can't accept that, maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding." Those words hit me like a slap in the face. "You can't do that." "I can if you keep acting like this. Laurel's trying to include you in the preparations, trying to make things work. What are you doing? Asking people about her past behind her back. How do you know that Enid's a small town, Mom," Esther Pringle told her daughter, who happens to work in the same office as Laurel. "News travels fast." I closed my eyes, feeling cornered. I just wanted to know the truth. The truth about what? About Laurel's tragedy as a child? That she overcame it and became successful against all odds? That should command respect, not suspicion. I remained silent, not knowing what to say. He was right, partly, but he didn't know the whole story. He didn't know about the money, about the notes, about the blackmail, about Laurel's life being ruined not only because of her father, but because of, "I don't want to fight with you." I'm just worried. Then stop worrying. Laurel is a good person, and she's gonna be your daughter-in-law, whether you like it or not. At least try to be civil at the wedding, okay? When we finished talking, I felt devastated. I looked at the medical bills again, at the articles about the Hatch family. It couldn't be a coincidence. Laurel, Mervyn Hatch's daughter, suddenly showing up in my son's life, dating him for 4 years, and now marrying him. I tucked the papers back into the box and slid it under the bed. The past that I'd been hiding so carefully all these years suddenly came alive and came after me. And now I didn't know how to stop it. The morning of the wedding day was clear. I spread out on the kitchen table the evidence I'd gathered over the past 2 weeks that Laurel was Mervyn Hatch's daughter, coming to avenge a ruined life. The most compelling was a photo from the Enid News archives. 13-year-old Laurel at her mother's funeral. Standing nearby was Marshall Lundy, a former Enid police detective who had investigated the Hatch case. I found Lundy 3 days ago. When I went to him with the paperwork, he didn't look surprised. I was expecting one of you to show up, he said, going through the papers with dry fingers. Only I thought it would be her, not you. It turned out that Lundy never closed the Hatch case, continuing to gather information about the blackmail. Interestingly, a young woman came to see me a year ago, he said in parting. Didn't give her name, but she asked very specific questions about the Hatch case. Laurel? I asked, already knowing the answer. Maybe. He held out a business card. If you need help. The kettle whistled, snapping me out of my memories. I folded the papers into a folder and tucked them into my bag. There were still a few hours until the ceremony began. The phone rang. It was Nina. Mom, are you ready? I'll be there in half an hour. I hurriedly put on the navy blue dress that Nina and I had picked out last week. When I got into her car, my daughter immediately noticed my condition. It was like seeing a ghost. What's wrong? I'm just worried, I lied. It's not every day my son gets married. Nina snorted. Don't make a scene, okay? Grant's on edge about this. What do you take me for? I snapped at her. A crazy old woman? No one thinks that. She sighed. It's just that you can be too direct. The guests were already gathering at the Cherokee Hotel. Nina left to find Grant, and I stayed in the lobby, clutching my bag of evidence tightly. Where would they lead? Would I be able to prevent my son's mistake, or would I only ruin our relationship forever? Mrs. Willoughby, Brenda Moffat, the wedding coordinator, flew up to me with a professional smile. You are gorgeous. Laurel has been asking about you. About me? I couldn't contain my surprise. Yes, she's in the bridal room and would like to see you. Something about a family tradition. Brenda lowered her voice to a dramatic whisper. She's very excited. Where is this room? The Magnolia Suite on the second floor. Would you like me to show you out? I'll be fine. In the second floor corridor, I easily found the door with the sign, Bride. When I knocked, I heard a soft, "Come in." Laurel stood in the middle of the room in her wedding dress, simple but elegant. Her brown hair was arranged in an elaborate style, and her gray eyes seemed colder than usual. Faye. She said my name with a kind of strange intimacy. I'm glad you came. Where are your bridesmaids? I asked, looking around the empty room. I don't have any. Laurel smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. I've always had a hard time making friends. Brenda said you wanted to see me. Yes? She walked over to the dressing table and picked up a small box. I wanted to give you something before the ceremony, a family heirloom. She handed me the box. Inside was an old silver necklace with a locket. This belonged to my mother, Laurel said quietly, and her mother before her. Thought you might want to wear it tonight. Why are you giving it to me? I scrutinized her face, trying to figure out the game. Because family is important. Her voice was suddenly sharp as a blade, even when it hurts, even when it destroys lives. I looked up and met her gaze, icy, penetrating. You know, I whispered. Of course I know. Laurel laughed, and her laugh was like the sound of shattered glass. Ever since I found my mother's diary, she wrote about the blackmailer who drove my father to suicide. The blood drained from my face. Laurel, shut up. She cut me off. I found out everything. I talked to my dad's co-workers, found Lundy. He told me about a postal worker with a sick kid who needed money for treatment. Caleb was dying. My voice is hoarse. It was his only chance. And for that chance, you destroyed my family. Her eyes flashed with rage. Dad could have gone to the police, confessed. Instead, you cornered him, drained him of his money until he broke. I never wanted him to die. But you know what the ironic thing is? Laurel leaned toward me, her perfume smelling of something bitter. Your son died anyway. All that dirty money was wasted. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. You don't know anything about Caleb. I jumped up. You don't know anything about what it's like to watch your child fade away. Do you know what it's like to end up in a mental institution at 13? She didn't back down. Or in foster care where you're treated like garbage. To live with the stigma of being the daughter of a suicide? I lowered my head, unable to bear her gaze. And now you're taking revenge by using my son. That's exactly right. Laurel turned back to the window, her silhouette silhouetted against the light. 4 years I planned the best way to ruin your life. 4 years of pretending, of playing the part of someone in love. You don't love him? Those words took my breath away. Love? She turned around, a grimace of contempt on her face. Grant was just a tool, sweet, trusting, weak, just like his mother. You can't do that to him, I exclaimed. It wasn't his fault. Was it my fault? There was steel in her voice. But Grant is your son, and that's all that matters. Laurel came closer. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna marry him today. A year from now, maybe 2 years from now, I'm gonna break up that marriage, make him suffer, take half of what he has, and you'll watch me slowly destroy what you hold dear, and you won't be able to do anything about it. I can tell him the truth, right now. You can try. She smiled, and there was nothing human in that smile. But then you'd have to tell him about yourself, about the blackmail, how you drove my father to the noose. Do you think Grant will ever forgive you for that? She was right, and we both knew it. Even with the evidence in the bag, I couldn't expose her without exposing myself. So what now? I asked, feeling trapped. Now you leave. Laurel headed toward the bathroom. I need to get my thoughts in order. But wait a minute. I want to show you something else. She disappeared out the door, and I was left standing there, stunned by the cruelty of her plan. Poor Grant. To tie his life to a woman who doesn't love him, who plans to destroy him. A minute passed, then another. I went to the bathroom door and knocked. Laurel? Silence. I pushed the door open. The bathroom was empty. When I noticed the second door, I realized she'd escaped out the back door. Rushing to the room's exit, I found the door locked. I pounded on it, calling for help, but no one answered. I was trapped. Back in the bathroom, I made sure the other door was locked too. Laurel had thought of everything, lured me here so I wouldn't interfere with the wedding. I found the phone by the bed, but the line was dead. The windows overlooked a deserted part of the yard, too high to jump. The clock showed 1 hour and 30, half an hour until the ceremony. I looked around the room, looking for anything that might help. In the guest closet, I found an iron-a-heavy metal-soled iron. In the bathroom, I found an aerosol air freshener. The plan was instantaneous. I went back to the door and scrutinized the lock. 32 years in the post office had taught me a thing or two about doors and security systems. It was a conventional electronic lock with an emergency mechanical system inside. So I turned the iron on to maximum heat and held it up to the smoke detector on the ceiling. When it was hot enough, I aimed a spray jet at it. A cloud of chemical spray hit the heated surface, causing thick smoke. A few seconds later, the fire alarm went off, a shrill howl filling the hallway. Electronic locks in hotels automatically unlock in the event of a fire alarm, a basic security requirement. The door clicked softly, and I jumped out into the corridor, where the confused guests and staff were already gathered. False alarm! I shouted, pushing through the crowd. I accidentally turned on the iron in the bathroom. No one paid any attention to me. Everyone was too busy evacuating the building. I quickly made my way down the stairs, avoiding the jammed elevator. The lobby was in chaos. I squeezed my way to the receptionist's desk and leaned over it. "Excuse me, I need a phone right away." The young receptionist, busy calming down the guests, simply waved his hand toward the phone. I grabbed the receiver and dialed the number for Lundy's detective agency. After the third ring, I heard his voice. "Lundy Detective Agency. Marshall, it's Faye Willoughby. Laurel confessed to everything. She locked me in my room, but I got out. She doesn't love Grant. She's using him for revenge, and she's planning to destroy our family." "Calm down, Mrs. Willoughby. What exactly did she say?" "That she knows about the blackmail, about what I did. She's been pretending to love Grant for 4 years. She wants to destroy our family like I destroyed hers." "And now what?" "The ceremony's about to start. I need your help. You have proof. If you wanted to solve the Hatch case, this is your chance." The pause seemed like an eternity. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said at last. "Try to delay the ceremony." The alarms went silent. The technicians had obviously figured out that the alarm was a false alarm. The guests slowly made their way back into the building. I asked the receptionist where the wedding was being held. "The Gold Room, first floor, west wing." But the alarm had delayed the start by 15 minutes. That gave me a little time. I quickly tidied up in the ladies' room, wetting my hair and smoothing my dress. Then I strode determinedly toward the Golden Hall. Brenda was standing at the entrance, checking invitations. When she saw me, she brightened. "Mrs. Willoughby, we've lost you. Laurel said you felt sick and came home." "As you can see, I'm perfectly fine," I replied, walking past her. "It was just a misunderstanding." Inside, the guests were seated. Grant stood at the altar, nervously adjusting his tie. Laurel wasn't there yet. The bride was traditionally the last to arrive. I spotted Nina in the front row and headed toward her. She looked surprised. "Mom, Laurel told me you left." "No, honey, just a little, misunderstanding." At that moment, the music started playing, and everyone turned toward the doors. Laurel walked in, resplendent in her dress. When she saw me, her eyes widened with shock for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together and continued down the aisle. I looked back at the front doors. Lundy was supposed to show up any minute. But what if he was late? The judge began the ceremony. I sat there on pins and needles, looking back at the doors. Finally, the words came out. "If anyone knows the reason why these two cannot marry, let him speak now or forever hold his peace." At that moment, the doors of the hall opened. On the threshold stood Marshall Lundy in a gray suit, with a folder of documents in his hands. I stood up and spoke loudly. "I have an objection." My voice, loud and firm, echoed through the room. The guests whispered, turning toward me and the man in the doorway. Marshall Lundy looked imposing, tall, with a military bearing and a piercing stare. Grant froze at the altar, his face contorted with a mixture of surprise and anger. Laurel turned pale, but remained icily calm. Lundy walked over and handed me the folder. Mom, what are you doing? Grant's voice was shaking. It's my day, our day. Your day is built on lies, I replied. Laurel isn't who she says she is. Nina tried to take my hand. Mom, please don't do this. I gently pulled free. I'm sane, Nina, and I've never been so sure. Marshal Lundy has stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Marshal Lundy, private investigator, former Enid police officer. Laurel stepped forward. What right do you have to barge into my wedding? Miss Paxton, Lundy said with emphasis on the last name. Or rather, Miss Hatch. I think you know why I'm here. At the word Hatch, a whisper ran through the room. Enid's old-timers remembered the name and the scandal associated with it. Grant shifted his gaze from Laurel to me. What's going on? Laurel, what is he talking about? Laurel stood still. Your mother's making a scene, just like I warned you. I pulled out an old newspaper clipping with a picture on it. Grant, that woman is not Laurel Paxton. Her real name is Laurel Hatch, daughter of Mervyn Hatch, a banker who committed suicide in 1978 after fraud charges. Laurel laughed. So what? A lot of people change their names, especially if they have painful memories of the past. Lundy stepped forward. It's not about changing your last name. It's about why you got close to Mrs. Willoughby's son. Grant looked lost. Laurel, what are they talking about? She took his hands in hers. Don't listen to them. They're trying to ruin our day. Your mother never accepted me. Tell him the truth. I stepped closer. Tell him what you confessed to me this morning, that you've been using him all these years. A meeting? Grant was confused. What meeting? Laurel invited me into her room today, I explained. And then she told me that she'd been planning this wedding for 4 years to get back at me. Revenge? For what? For the death of her father and, indirectly, her mother. In 1978, someone started blackmailing Mervyn Hatch. Laurel turned sharply to the detective. You promised not to solve this case. I promised to follow through, he said calmly. Grant stepped between us. Enough. Can someone please explain what's going on? Laurel, what revenge? What blackmail? Laurel was silent. I knew this was the moment of truth. Everything I'd been hiding for so long was about to come out. I did it, I said quietly. I blackmailed Mervyn Hatch. Nina gasped. Grant froze, looking at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. What? Lundy nodded. In 1978, Mrs. Willoughby worked at the post office, had access to correspondence, including letters revealing Hatch's fraud with mortgages for veterans. Caleb was dying, I continued. He was only 3 years old. The experimental treatment cost more money than we could raise. I was desperate. And you, blackmailed a man? Grant looked horrified. I found letters proving that Hatch was cheating veterans. I demanded hush money. Money that would have saved Caleb, Lundy added. Laurel broke into a bitter laugh. Saved? But they didn't, did they? Your son died, and my father hanged himself in the garage. I, a 12-year-old girl, found him. A year later, my mother couldn't bear the shame and took a lethal dose of sleeping pills. I was sent to a psychiatric hospital, then to foster homes. Because of you. I'm sorry, I whispered. I never wanted him to. You're lying. You didn't care about him, about his family. You only cared about your own children. Grant slumped back in his chair, his face pale. God, and you? He looked up at Laurel. Did you find me on purpose? You've been pretending all this time? Laurel didn't answer. Grant covered his face with his hands. 4 years, 4 years of lies. I wanted her to feel it, Laurel finally said. I wanted her to know what it was like to have your most precious possession taken away from you. Using me? Grant raised reddened eyes. I was just a tool? You were the son of the woman who ruined my life, she replied coldly. That was all that mattered. And then? There was desperate hope in his voice. Laurel turned away. What does it matter? It's over. Lundy coughed. There's something else important. In his suicide note, Mervyn mentioned blackmail, but he didn't name names. The police started an investigation, but it was soon dropped. Do you know why? Because the real mastermind behind the fraudulent scheme wasn't Mervyn Hatch. He was just the executor. It was Warren Paxton, Doris Hatch's brother, and Laurel's uncle. That was unexpected. I'd never heard of it. Only Mervyn was mentioned in the letters. Warren Paxton, Lundy continued, used his brother-in-law, knowing that Hatch himself would never go against the law willingly. He blackmailed him with dirt. When another blackmailer came along, he nodded at me. Hatch was caught between two fires. Laurel looked stunned. Uncle Warren, the one who took me in after my mother died? That's the one. He used the money from the fraud for his business and forced you to change your name to Paxton, ostensibly to avoid a connection to your suicidal father, really to keep anyone from digging too deep. No, Laurel shook her head. That can't be true. He cared about me. He used you, Lundy said softly, just like you used Grant, a vicious cycle of revenge. There was a heavy silence in the room. Grant stood up, his movements mechanical. So that's how it was. My mother the blackmailer, my fiancé the vigilante who used me. It's a beautiful family history. Grant, I took a step toward him, but he stopped me with a gesture. Don't, Mom. Just don't. Don't. He turned to the guests. I apologize to everyone. There will be no wedding. You can stay for the buffet if you want. It's all paid for. With those words, he headed for the exit. Laurel rushed after him. Grant, wait, I can explain. He stopped at the door. There's nothing to explain, Laurel. You've been using me for revenge for 4 years. And you know what the funny thing is? I really loved you. Every day of those 4 years. He walked out of the hall. Laurel froze, then slowly turned to me. Happy? You ruined everything. Again. I didn't know what to say. Was I happy? No, but I couldn't let her use my son. Lundy walked over to Laurel and handed her some documents. These are copies of my investigation into your uncle's role. I think you should study them. She took the papers mechanically, without even looking at them, and walked towards the exit. A proud, lonely figure in a white dress. The guests began to disperse. I stood in the middle of the ruined wedding, feeling the weight of the past that had finally caught up with me. Nina came up to me. Is it true? Did you really blackmail that man? I nodded. For Caleb's sake? Yes, I whispered. He was dying, Nina. He needed treatment that required a lot of money. Your father and I sold everything we could, mortgaged the house, but it wasn't enough. And then I found these letters. I couldn't continue. The tears I'd been holding back all day finally burst. Where is Grant now? I asked, wiping my cheeks. I don't know. Nina shook her head. He's gone. I think he needs time. And I need to find him. I headed for the exit. Lundy stopped me. Mrs. Willoughby, give him time. He's just learned some shocking things about the two women closest to him. He needs to think it over. You don't understand. He could do something stupid in his condition. I have to find him. I understand better than you think, Lundy said quietly. I've seen a lot of families destroyed by secrets. Believe me, the best thing you can do now is to give him time. I wanted to object, but something in his eyes stopped me. All right, but if he doesn't show up by tonight, I'll start looking for him. Stepping out of the hotel into the bright sunlight, I felt strangely relieved. The secret I'd been carrying around for nearly 50 years was finally coming out. The chains of the past that had bound me all these years had broken. Nina offered to drive me home, but I refused. I needed to walk, to breathe, to collect my thoughts before the inevitable conversation with Grant, if he would even agree to talk to me. I walked the streets of Enid, the town where I'd lived all my life, where I'd raised my children, buried my husband and oldest son, a town where I did something that changed the lives of many people, including Laurel Hatch, the girl who grew up without parents because of my desperation. Could I blame her for wanting revenge? For using Grant to hurt me? Part of me understood her. The other part could never forgive her for what she'd done to my son. 3 weeks had passed since the failed wedding. Summer had taken hold, and Enid was sweltering in the heat. I sat on the veranda of my house, looking at the morning paper. On page 3 was a small note. Warren Paxton pleads guilty to financial fraud. Another echo of the day when all the secrets came out. Suddenly, Nina's car pulled into the driveway. She came by every day after work to check on me, bring groceries, just to sit by me. She hadn't been this caring even after Jack died. "Hi, Mom." Nina came up on the porch with a paper bag in her hands. "I brought peaches. You said you wanted to make jam." I smiled at my daughter, putting the paper aside. "Thank you, dear. But you shouldn't have bothered. I would have gone to the market myself." "It's not difficult for me." Nina sat down next to me, was quiet, then asked, "Have you heard from Grant?" I shook my head. Since that day at the Cherokee Hotel, Grant hadn't returned my calls, hadn't come by, hadn't made himself known. It was like he'd cut me out of his life. Nina said he'd moved to the neighboring town of Perry, gotten a new job, and was trying to make a fresh start. "He's still very angry," Nina said quietly. "I called him yesterday. He doesn't want to talk about you." "I understand," I nodded. I ruined his wedding, revealed the unpalatable truth about myself. "He needs time." Nina took my hand. "He's stubborn, like you." "And like your father," I added with a slight smile. "Jack couldn't forgive either. Remember how he didn't speak to me for 3 days when I accidentally threw away his old fishing hat?" Nina laughed. "Yes, and then he brought it up every chance he got for a month." We fell silent, each of us immersed in our own thoughts. Over the past weeks, Nina and I had become closer than we had been in years. She didn't judge me for my past, though she was shocked at first. On the contrary, it seemed that my humanity, my mistakes, made me more real in her eyes. "Did you know that Warren Paxton's trial is today?" Nina asked, nodding at the newspaper. "Laurel will be there too." "I read it," I replied. "I can't say I'm happy about his downfall. Another life ruined by the chain of events I set in motion." "Stop blaming yourself for everything," Nina said firmly. "You didn't make Warren Paxton blackmail your brother-in-law and set off a fraudulent scheme. You didn't make Laurel defraud Grant for 4 years. Everyone made their own choices." I nodded, though I wasn't completely convinced. The chain of cause and effect that had started almost 50 years ago never seemed to break. "You know, I want to go to court," I said suddenly. Nina raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Why? Don't you get enough shocks?" "I need to see how it all ends. I want to talk to Laurel, maybe for the last time." "I'll go with you," my daughter said immediately. "I don't want you to be there alone." I squeezed her hand, feeling grateful for this unexpected support. All my life I had been strong, a support for my children. Now that my strength had waned, Nina had found the courage to be a pillar for me. The courthouse was filled with reporters and gawkers. The Paxton case had caused quite a furor in Little Enid. You bet, a respected businessman was linked to a fraudulent scheme half a century old. Nina and I slipped into the hall and sat in the far corner, hoping to remain unnoticed. Warren Paxton looked aged and broken. His once straight back was hunched, and his lush hair had turned completely gray. Laurel sat next to him, wearing a dark suit and her hair in a bun. I couldn't see her face, only the back of her head, but even so I could feel her tension. The trial went on as usual. Warren pleaded guilty to orchestrating a fraudulent scheme involving mortgages for veterans, blackmailing Mervyn Hatch, and withholding evidence after his death. His attorney asked for leniency given the defendant's age and health. The prosecutor asked for the maximum sentence, noting that many victims of the fraud never received compensation. Marshall Lundy, who sat in the front row, was called to testify. He recounted his years-long investigation, how he gradually gathered evidence against Paxton, and, to my relief, never once mentioned my name. Then Laurel had the floor. She stood up, squared her shoulders, and spoke in a clear, confident voice. "Your Honor, I want to testify against my uncle. After my parents died, he took custody of me, not out of kinship, but out of fear that I might know something about his dealings with my father. He forced me to change my last name from Hatch to Paxton, explaining it was out of concern for my future. In reality, he wanted to sever any ties to the past that might expose him." Her voice shook, but she quickly pulled herself together. "When I was 18, I found my mother's diary. In it, she wrote about my father being forced to participate in machinations under pressure from his brother-in-law, and that someone at the post office was blackmailing him, demanding money for his silence. That was the last straw. Dad couldn't take it anymore and killed himself." I clung to Nina's hand. "This is it. Now Laurel's gonna call my name, and the whole town's gonna know what I did." I asked my uncle about it. He denied it at first, then admitted there was someone, but he said it didn't matter. All those responsible had been punished long ago. I tried to forget, to move on, but I couldn't. So I started my own investigation. I found Detective Lundy, who had once worked on my father's case. He helped me find out that the blackmailer was Fay Willoughby, a post office employee whose young son was terminally ill. A whisper ran through the hall. A few heads turned in our direction. I lowered my gaze, unable to meet the eyes of the people who had just learned my secret. "I decided to get revenge," Laurel continued. "I found out that Fay Willoughby had a son, Grant. I met him on purpose, started dating him. For 4 years, I pretended to love him, planning to end up destroying their family the way mine had been destroyed." Her voice trembled, and she was silent for a moment, gathering her strength. "But Grant turned out to be a good man. He didn't deserve that kind of revenge. And though I went on with my plan, each day I found it harder and harder. I wanted to stop, but Uncle Warren insisted I keep going. He said I owed it to my father's memory. In fact, he was afraid that if I refused to take revenge, he might start asking questions about his own role in my parents' deaths." The judge listened intently, making occasional notes. Warren Paxton sat with his head down, not looking at his niece. "On the day of the wedding, I talked to Fay Willoughby, told her the truth about myself. I wanted her to know that her son was marrying the daughter of the man she drove to suicide. It was supposed to be my final revenge. But she was stronger than I thought. She was able to stop the wedding, to tell the truth even though she knew she would lose her son. She had the courage to admit her guilt." Laurel finally turned and looked directly at me. There was no hatred in her eyes, just weariness and something resembling humility. "I don't apologize for wanting revenge on the woman who destroyed my family, but I do apologize to Grant Willoughby for using him, and I ask the court to consider my uncle's role in this story. He didn't just know about my plans for revenge. He encouraged them, guided me, used my pain to his advantage, just as he once used my father." After she spoke, a break was called. People began to leave the auditorium, many looking back at me, whispering. I sat motionless, unable to get up. "Let's go, Mom," Nina said quietly. "You need some air." It was cooler in the hallway. I leaned against the wall, trying to fight the dizziness. So many years of secrecy, so many years of pretending, and now it was all coming out. The whole town knew what I'd done. "Mrs. Willoughby," I turned around and saw Laurel standing a few feet away from me. Nina tensed, ready to defend me, but I gestured for her to stop. "It's okay, Nina. Let us talk in private." My daughter reluctantly stepped back, but stayed within sight. Laurel approached, her face serious and tired. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I had to come," I replied, "to see how it ended." She nodded, looking past me. "You know, I thought I'd be happy when you suffered the way I did, but when I saw Grant's face that day, I felt nothing but emptiness." "Revenge is rarely satisfying," I said quietly. "Neither does blackmail," she parried, but without anger. We were silent. Two women bound by a tragedy neither could change. "What's going to happen to Grant?" Laurel finally asked. Is he okay?" "Nina says he moved to Perry, started a new life. He won't talk to me." Laurel nodded. "He's strong. He'll get through this." "What about you? What's going to happen to you?" She shrugged. "I'm not charged with any crime, except for fraud with intent to marry, but Grant didn't press charges. After the trial, I'll probably leave Enid. Too many memories." "I understand," I nodded. "But you know, sometimes you can't escape the past. It always finds a way to catch up with you." "How it caught up with you?" It wasn't a question. "Yeah, and I can't say I'm sorry. It's hard to live with that burden." Laurel looked me straight in the eye. "You really didn't want my father to die?" "No," I said firmly. "I swear. All I wanted was money for Caleb's treatment. When I found out about your father's suicide, I I hesitated, remembering the day I read about it in the paper. I was devastated. I wanted to go to the police to confess, but Jack stopped me. He said my kids needed me. And my parents didn't need me?" There was an old pain in her voice. "They needed you. They needed you. Your father and your mother loved you more than life itself. It's just. Sometimes people break under the weight of circumstance. That doesn't mean they don't love their children." Laurel lowered her gaze, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. "I know," she whispered. "I've always known it. It was just easier to hate you than to accept the truth." We were silent again. People were beginning to appear in the courtroom as the recess came to an end. "I have to go," Laurel said. "The judge is waiting." "What do you have to say about your uncle?" I asked. "Are you going to ask for leniency for him?" She shook her head. "No, he used my pain to protect himself. He knew the truth about his father's death all these years, and he kept silent. Let him get what he deserves." I nodded. "Fair enough. What about you?" she asked. "Did you get what you deserved?" I wondered. The loss of my son, the public exposure, the condemnation of neighbors I'd lived side by side with all my life. "Yeah, I guess that was fair." "I guess so," I said. "But you know what's weird? I feel relieved. It's like the weight I've been carrying for 50 years is finally gone." Laurel smiled weakly. "Me too. It's like I can finally breathe." With those words, she walked away, disappearing behind the courtroom doors. I remained standing in the hallway, feeling strangely calm. Not forgiveness. No, too much had happened for me to just forgive and forget, but some kind of understanding, acceptance. In the evening, Nina and I sat on the veranda, drinking tea and watching the sun go down. Its rays were diffusing into the crowns of the trees, creating a bizarre pattern of light and shadow. I thought about Laurel, about her uncle, about Grant, about myself, about the chain of events I had set in motion years ago that had brought us all to this moment, about the weight of secrets and lies, and the release that truth, however bitter, brings. I didn't know what awaited me next. Perhaps loneliness in a town where everyone now knew my secret. Perhaps moving somewhere where no one knew me. Perhaps a slow, painful rebuilding of my relationship with my son, if he would ever be willing to listen to me. But no matter what happened, I knew one thing. I would no longer live a lie. I would accept the consequences of my actions, whatever they were. And in that decision, in that honesty with myself, I found a strange, bitter release